The United Nations has expressed concern about growing protests in Venezuela ahead of the inauguration of President Nicolas Maduro and the brief detention of the country's main opposition leader. Phil Gunson is a senior analyst at the International Crisis Group and he joins me now from Venezuela for more. Phil, thank you so much for your time. Does this morning's news of the kidnapping of Maria Corina Machado surprise and concern you?
It was shocking. We always knew that there was a possibility that she might be arrested. In fact, the government, for many years, 10, 15 years even, has been accusing Maria Corina of treason, of attempting to overthrow the government, of money laundering, of all sorts of things, and threatening her with arrest. And she's been in hiding since the presidential election last July. She appeared today for the first time in many weeks. And obviously, there was a risk attached. So it wasn't entirely surprising, but the way in which it happened was rather shocking, and it was also rather confusing. We're still not absolutely clear exactly the circumstances.
You've said recently that it's normal for people to have been effectively kidnapped over the last few days. Can you just explain how and why that is happening?
It's happening as far as the why is concerned. It's happening because, President Nicolas Maduro lost very badly an election at the end of July, but refused to accept defeat. In fact, he's insisting that he won the election, although the opposition has all the proof required to show that their candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, won. So what we've seen is a significant increase in repression since July, which has involved the arrest in the days after the election of almost 2,000 people arbitrarily held, without due process. But there's also been a significant wave of arrests, detentions, disappearances even. We call them kidnaps because in many cases what happens is that you're picked up off the street by uniformed men but with no identification, with the faces covered, and you disappear for days at a time. And this is intended to intimidate. It's intended to persuade the opposition to give up its attempt to bring Edmundo Gonzalez back into the country. He's been in exile for the past few months in Spain. But they've insisted that he will come back and he will be sworn in as president. The government is obviously concerned about that, and they're trying to instill fear, essentially.
Can you give us a bit more of an idea of who Nicolas Maduro is and how it is that he's managed to secure this third term as president?
Well, Maduro is the successor to Hugo Chavez, who many people will remember, who came to power democratically in Venezuela in 1999 and died of cancer in 2013. He named Maduro as his successor. Maduro won a rather disputed election in 2013 and has ruled ever since, very much amid increasing unpopularity. He's been increasingly dependent on the military and the police to stay in power. And the economy has collapsed under Maduro. The economy of Venezuela, which used to be quite healthy and indeed went through a boom in the oil boom years earlier this century, the economy has collapsed. The economy today is maybe 25% of the size that it was when Maduro took power. And as a result of that, 7 or 8 million people have left Venezuela because they simply can't put food on the table, can't clothe their children, can't live, essentially.
And can you just briefly give us a bit of an idea of the situation at the moment? We know there have been some fairly significant protests. We've been seeing those images throughout this morning.
Yeah, I mean, there were protests today, despite the fact that people are clearly very scared to go on the streets. And the protests were aimed at, in the words of Maria Corina, who wasn't the presidential candidate because she was banned from standing, but who is, the leader of the opposition. She's the politician with the most popularity in the country. I mean, her aim is to make it impossible for Nicolas Maduro to govern, both by internal pressure, through putting people on the streets, and also through external pressure. And that's all obviously been boosted by the election of Donald Trump, whose hardline policy in 2019 really put Maduro on the defensive. Um, but right now, there's no clear indication that Edmundo Gonzalez, who's still outside the country, he's in the Dominican Republic at the moment, will be able to come back, and much less that he'll be able to be sworn in as president. So it looks like this attempt to oust Maduro in the short term, at least, is not going to succeed.